The one thing they don't talk about is the data. They always exclude that. Not only what data they use, but typically the data curation process that they use to get that better data. All the time, right? People want to hire me. I don't have that same struggle as you do trying to break into the field. Looked at the job description, like, dude, you're out of your mind. First of all, you're going to get two kinds of people that apply for this role: people who don't know what they're looking for and people who don't know what they're looking for. So, and just that pressure of saying, okay, dude, this could be in front of thousands and thousands of people, and it's associated with the big brand. Like, people aren't interviewing me the same way that they're going to be interviewing you. You know, that's the secret sauce.
Welcome back to the Insights by Design podcast. We're thrilled to be joined today by Harpreet Sahota. Harpreet, how are you?
Good. Thanks for inviting me. Happy to be here.
We're thrilled to have you. For those who haven't come across you, I would be happy to introduce you. Harpreet is the hacker-in-residence, machine learning engineer, and developer advocate at Voxel 51. He's a 2 times LinkedIn learning instructor with 3 more courses planned for this year. He's the host of the Harpreet podcast, which is formerly The Artist of Data Science, the author of the upcoming practical Retrieval Augmented Generation, Building Context-Aware AI Systems, coming out in 2025 from Wiley, and he has a Master's of Science in Mathematics and Statistics from the Illinois State University. Harpreet, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, man. So happy to be here.
To kick it off, Harpreet, I'd like to ask, you've had quite a journey from biostatistician to your current role as a developer advocate at Voxel 51, as Andrew mentioned. What inspired you to make the transition into the world of computer vision and AI?
Yeah, so kind of taking it back, even before I was a biostatistician, when I was in grad school, I was initially studying to be an actuary. And the thing I loved about actuarial sciences was this particular niche called predictive analytics. And predictive analytics, when I was learning that and working on that, it's all just linear models, generalized linear models, and random forest and stuff like that. So classical ML type of stuff. But I had to become a biostatistician in order to move to Canada to be with my then fiance and now wife and mother of kids. So that was like a move out of necessity. Coming from the U.S. into Canada, I was able to get a job as, apparently I was highly skilled, and I get under the treaty agreement. I worked as a biostatistician for a while, and so me going back to like data science and machine learning stuff was just getting back in touch with my roots. Because after when I moved to Canada, I had to like work at that one job until I got a permanent residency, which then allowed me to work anywhere. So basically until I got my green card, and at that point I realized it was like rebranded as machine learning and data science. I did that for a while, worked for a couple of local companies, and realized that most of my job as a data scientist was becoming data management and data governance, and not as much, of the stuff I love, which is writing code and building models. And I got into developer relations actually just by accident, kind of. There's a company called Comet ML, and they wanted to sponsor my podcast. And so I was hosting like these happy hour sessions, or rather office hour sessions with Comet. And they're like, hey, we got this role as developer advocate. We'd love you to come and join and, maybe do this role. And I looked at the job description and was like, damn, this is like all the stuff I do on the side. It's like a full-time job, because at that time I've been working at like this program that was like helping people transition into data science. And that job was like managing the Slack community, hosting office hours, creating technical content. I mean, that's all DevRel right there. And so that kind of got me to develop relations specifically into deep learning. That happened like about 2 years ago. And at that point I was like, I don't know, deep learning just always felt like some weird, fringe, interesting computer science stuff to me. And it was like, I don't know, I was in a sense kind of scared of it. But then I was like, what's weird? I'll just go learn it anyways. And then found out that really it's just a bunch of sequences of matrix multiplications with a few non-linearities in between. I was like, oh, this shit isn't that scary like at all. It's just regular algebra, linear algebra, and just started going deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole.
I love that. And today, with AI being the directive from many boards, I think the term AI is confusing for a lot of people as to what they actually mean. How would you define the difference between a few of the concepts that you've brought up with machine learning, AI, and deep learning?
So I tend to take like kind of like a more technical viewpoint of it, right? Like machine learning to me is just kind of those classical methods where maybe we're using just generalized linear models, we're doing random forests, support vector machines, XGBoost, things like that. We're working on essentially tabular data sets, right? that's, to me, that's the kind of the domain of classical machine learning and statistical learning. When we start working with things like unstructured data, like text or images or, you know, those modalities, audio, for example, that we can't put that into a tabular data set, right? So we need to find some other ways to parse that information. And so we go from tabular data sets now to tensors. And once we start working with tensors, then that's deep learning. You know, and you know, the architectures, the model architectures are significantly different than what we see in classical ML. Now we got this wave of generative AI, which is still deep learning models, but instead of like discriminating between classes, the models are themselves generating some kind of output. And I don't know if that answers your question. I'll pause there, and you feel free to dig in a little bit more.
That's incredibly helpful. And with your role as a developer advocate, as you noted, it requires a lot of communication skills, but also technical prowess. How do you balance the technical aspects of your role with the need to communicate those complex ideas to a more broad audience?
I think I developed the technical skill by having to communicate it. It just forces me to learn it more in depth. So that's kind of how I balance that. I'm fortunate in that as a developer advocate, most of my job is just having to learn about stuff and stuff that I especially find interesting and communicate it. And so, you know, I think it goes hand in hand, man. I don't think there's like a clear separation between technical skill and good communication skills. You find the best technical people are often the ones that can communicate their ideas the best. And they're the ones that go further and are able to make a bigger impact. I think people who just overly focus on technical skills will find themselves a bit jaded and dissatisfied. Maybe they're not able to get jobs because they can't communicate their technical ability or technical knowledge in an interview, or maybe they just over-index on just trying to learn, you know, too much technical stuff without actually applying it. So, as a technical person, apply your skill set, whether that's through creating content. You know, you have to learn it better. You have to understand it more deeply.
Yeah, that's a theme we've heard from quite a few podcast guests. The technical stuff is important, but you got to be able to talk about it, and you've got to be able to write about it. And you've been very successful with both talking about it and writing about it. In fact, you're writing a book on retrieval augmented generation, or RAG, set to be published by Wiley in February 2025. Can you explain RAG in simple terms for listeners like me who might not be super familiar with the concept?
Yeah, so I guess by this point, we're all kind of familiar with ChatGPT and things like that, where we are able to interact with the language model, but that language model is limited by the data it was trained on. So in order for you to have this language model reason over your own private data, which maybe is not included in its training data, you need to find some way to incorporate that data into the context window. And so RAG is really kind of a paradigm and workflow that helps with that. So it helps connect your external data set or private data set to a language model so that the language model can reason over it and generate a response. I think there's a lot more to it than that, but at a high level, that's what RAG is.
Gotcha. So if you want to know more, get the book.
Yeah, I've got a LinkedIn Learning course that's actually going to be published soon, hands-on retrieval augmented generation with Llama Index. So super, super technical. I go right, like, you know, we go straight into the code and go real deep, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have about that.
What was your experience like creating LinkedIn courses? And it looks like you've doubled down on creating more and more content. So what was your experience like, and what do you like about it that has caused you to continue to create more LinkedIn Learning content?
Creating LinkedIn Learning courses is grueling. It is a lot of work. It doesn't pay much at all, so I wouldn't recommend doing it. Unless, of course, you are just highly motivated by, let's just say, incentives. And in this case, the incentive for me was, okay, like, this is LinkedIn Learning. It's potentially, their platform has 700 million users. The learning platform has millions of users. Potentially the stuff I put on there will have been consumed by, you know, thousands of people, right? And in order for me to learn something or have the incentive to go learn something, I need to have high stakes involved with it. So I use LinkedIn Learning as a way for me to go learn about stuff. They give me like a little bit of an advance to, you know, create the course, which isn't much, but it's enough of a incentive for me to really learn the subject matter well, so I can teach it well. So that's kind of why I do LinkedIn Learning courses. I've got like a couple more on contract, I'll stop after that. But I think it's a great platform, right? Like they have a high standard, high bar for what they put on their platform. And just that pressure of saying, okay, dude, this could be in front of thousands and thousands of people. And it's associated with a big brand. Like I have to do a good job. I have to learn this stuff well so I can teach it well.
According to the best available data we could find, you've mentored over 2,500 aspiring data scientists, including on platforms like LinkedIn Learning. What would you say are the most common misconceptions about data science you've had to address with your mentees?
Yeah, that number comes strictly from the Data Science Dream Job that's now defunct. That platform that I was a part of, we had thousands of students on that platform, and through those sessions, I did weekly kind of mentoring calls and office hours. And the biggest misconception is just people just seem to think that they need to know everything in order to get a job in data science. And I think that's partly because, at that time, we're talking 2018 to 2021 in that case, in this case, a lot of job descriptions just put everything on it. And it's ridiculous. And even now, that's still a problem. I was looking at a job description. I was going to do some consulting with somebody to help them find people for an AI engineer role. And I looked at the job description, like, dude, you're out of your mind. First of all, you're going to get two kinds of people that apply for this role: people who don't know what they're looking for, and people who just don't know what they're looking for. So the biggest misconception is, just people think they need to know everything. They don't really kind of focus on the type of role that they want. Because honestly, the profile for a data scientist is vastly different from the profile of a machine learning engineer or an AI engineer. So if you're a data scientist, chances are you're going to be working with primarily tabular data sets, or you're doing some type of product analytics and maybe some light classical ML, which is wildly different than what you're doing as a machine learning engineer, which is also quite different than what you're doing as a AI engineer. So just get really specific about the type of role that you want and surround yourself with people who already have that role and kind of follow their trajectory and their journey. Another thing is, dude, I get hit up all the time by people who are just trying to break into the field, and they're asking me what they need to do to get into the field. And I'm so far removed from that in the sense that I've been in the field for quite a long time already. I don't remember what it's like trying to break into the field, honestly. So, you're reaching out to somebody that has a ton of experience who, frankly, just has job offers in their inbox, all the time, right? People want to hire me. I don't have that same struggle as you do trying to break into the field. So you should probably find people who are 1 or 2 steps ahead of you, somebody who's just got a job, within the last 6 months to a year, and ask them for advice on what it takes to break into the field. Because people aren't interviewing me the same way that they're going to be interviewing you.
That's such good advice, and I appreciate you bringing that up. And I think that's one of the reasons that Andrew Jones of Data Science Infinity and Avery Smith of his Data Career Jumpstart are so helpful, because that's all they do is coach people into breaking into whatever field they're trying to get into. And all they do is meet with hiring managers and try to understand what the market needs and what works, what doesn't work. It's like asking your star basketball player to become a coach. It's that's not what I do.
Yeah.
I'm a basketball player. I crush my role, but I'm not a coach. I can't help you break into it. And a lot of times we'll see on LinkedIn really bad advice because it's survivorship bias. Somebody happens to land a role and they're like, here's how everybody can land a role. No, maybe you were the only person who reasonably applied. The only person with that skill set that doesn't generally apply to what's going to give you the highest success. Often companies are also confused about what they need. So I appreciate you bringing up the fact that you were consulting with a company to help them identify the core attributes of an AI engineer. What are some of those attributes or skills that an AI engineer needs that are different from, for instance, a machine learning engineer?
Yeah, I think an AI engineer is mostly just a traditional software engineer that has some exposure to machine learning systems. So that's the entry point to AI engineer. You're a software engineer who understands a bit about machine learning, and maybe you're comfortable working with non-deterministic outputs in your system, right? So that's kind of the defining line. Whereas machine learning engineer, I think, is the one that's more so building and fine-tuning models. So AI engineer is probably going to be working primarily with the APIs and sending data into the API, collecting the data out of the API, ensuring that the data is structured and formatted, because language models are strings in, strings out. So you need to have a layer in between there to format that output. they're also probably going to be setting up systems to do logging and tracing for the outputs of LLMs. I'm trying to understand, what prompts lead to what outputs from the LLM. So there's a great blog post by Swyx, SWYX, Swyx. It's called The Rise of the AI Engineer. And actually, he just released a podcast episode. I was listening to it yesterday a little bit. And they're talking about just how to hire for AI engineering roles. And a lot of what he was saying just kind of rings true with what I gleaned as well. Is typical AI engineer roles are first and foremost software engineers that have some exposure to ML systems.
So given your experience across different data roles, what advice would you give to companies looking to build their first data science team, including perhaps AI engineers?
That's I've been the first data scientist at an organization, and this was back in like 2019, pre-Gen AI hype boom, and a lot of it was just getting data in a good enough shape for people to use and work with. So I think it might be like kind of a meme or a trope by now, but it's like the first hire should kind of be like a data engineer or a data architect type of role that helps companies really take this mess of data they have and get it into shape. At that point, once the data is in shape, then definitely go and hire somebody that is going to be able to make use of that to drive value, because you can't really get value out of just a slop of data, no matter what language model you try to toss it into. So I think that's really the biggest piece of advice is first hire somebody that has more of a data engineer type of profile or data architect type of profile.
That's really good advice. And we've seen a lot on job descriptions, more and more open source tools and skills. So at Voxel 51, I believe you use 51, which is an open source computer vision tool. Mm-hmm. How do you see the role of open source tools shaping the future of AI and ML going forward?
Open source has shaped software since software has been a thing, and I think it'll only continue to do so. I think having a culture of openness is great, right? Like the more we can share ideas, the more we just collectively get better. That's the biggest role, right? Like open source is going to help push us all forward in the long run. There might be some layers on that you might need to charge for, of course, because people need to make money, people have families to feed. But as long as a lot of the core functionalities out there in the open, it's only going to be better for us overall as a field, and as humans. The more we can share knowledge, the more we can push things forward, because everybody else can build on top of it.
We've seen a big push for companies moving more towards open source, and sometimes surprising. We saw Meta open source Llama. We saw Snowflake announce that they're going to open source their Iceberg catalog, Polaris. Do you feel like open source may just be a marketing play, or that companies are seeing the value of opening up new technologies to kind of crowdsource intelligence?
Yeah, so I think when you're talking about models, there should be a line in the sand that we draw, because there's open source, fully open source, and there's open weights. And so a lot of, like, I used to work at SEI, a lot of the stuff we put out was open weights. Llama is open weights, but it's not open source because they're not fully sharing the data sets that they use and the methodologies they use to build that model. They're putting the weights out there so that researchers can hack around with it and build with it, and kind of explore it in that way. But they're not fully sharing their methodology or the science behind or the science and the engineering behind how they built that model. So I think there's a fine line in the sand to draw there. And yeah, so the fact about, you asked in the question about whether open source is a marketing play or not. I think in some cases, yes, definitely it is. I doubt in Meta's case it's a marketing play. I think in Meta's case it's just a flex, like, we can do this. Come work for us. Come join us. If you're smart, we're building these things. In that case, it's a recruiting play. When I was at Deci AI, for sure, 100%, it was a marketing play. And Deci was now acquired by NVIDIA, so that marketing play worked out for them. So yeah, I think some people do open source models like that as a marketing play. But also, like, it's just marketing is not a bad thing. We're talking about it in bad, I just spoke about it as if it was a bad word. It's not a bad thing. You need marketing. People need to know about you. So open source is also a way to gain more users, right? The more people use your product, the more people come together around your product, you get this kind of network effect. So now you have community members like, our Slack channel of Voxel 51. Like I logged in today because it's my week to handle questions, and we got this awesome community member named Joy. He's just in there answering all the questions. Like, dude, you've done my entire job for me for this day. We should hire you. But just that network effect of people coming together and exchanging ideas around a product or tool is also going to push people forward. So there is certain network effects for open source. You get more content out there, more kind of technical materials. People hear about you. People are happy to see you at conferences because they use your tool, and they've gotten so much value from you. In that case, that's good marketing, positive marketing. It's the best kind of marketing. So I don't think open source is necessarily like sleazy marketing, in the sense that we're out there doing this slimy kind of marketing. I think it's good marketing if you do frame it as marketing.
Yeah, a lot of times people think of marketing as a bad word, like you mentioned, but a lot of modern marketing theory emphasizes value and establishing relationships with your clients as opposed to just shoving these technologies down their throat that maybe they need and maybe they don't. And so I think having that relationship approach to marketing takes away some of the fear that individuals might have as they're trying to get the word out there and be noticed and advance their careers. I'd like you to look again into your crystal ball, Harpreet, and tell us, how do you see these technologies converging in the future? RAG, agents, and multimodal AI.
Yeah, so RAG, for sure, it's at least in the medium term, I think is here to stay. We just need language models to be able to connect with our external data sources or data sources that they were not trained on. And primarily that's been done using text, but more and more now we're seeing it being used with, kind of multimodal outputs, in the sense that now we can retrieve images from our vector data store and insert that into a context for a language model or a multimodal language model that can understand images as well. So now we have models that can reason over text and images and things like that. So I was working on a proof of concept for this company, and they had these, they call them product manuals or solution manuals. And these solution manuals were heavily dominated by figures and images plus text. And they wanted to build a QA system over that so that their salespeople are able to quickly answer questions whenever somebody has, prospect has a question. And text is great, but if you're able to fetch like relevant images and things like that, that's even more helpful for a company or, the end user to have access to that knowledge that, is a bit tough to search for when you're just doing grep or, spotlight search on your computer. Agents are interesting for sure. Agents, if you look at it in the most simplest way possible, an agent is nothing more than a prompting strategy. That's really what it is. You're kind of leading a language model down a certain trajectory in its kind of token space. And then we're able to have that language model now interact with external tools, which is definitely interesting. So my buddy Jacob that works with me here at Voxel 51 is working on something called Voxel GPT. And sadly, I didn't get to work on this as much as I wanted to with him, but our use case here is, Voxel 51, the library is really robust. There's a lot of functionality with it. And for a newcomer to come to it, they might have a bit of an uphill kind of learning curve. And we want to make it easy as possible for somebody to not only just use 51, the product itself, but also just to understand the data set that they're working with. So he built out this system, this Voxel GPT agent system, where you come in as a user, you ask a question, and the agent will take action against your data set and show you what is in your data set that corresponds to that natural language text, which then gets converted to 51 syntax, which then gets executed against your data set. And now we're able to see this stuff. It's also just helpful for asking for code snippets and things like that. Where the agent trajectory is headed over the next few years, I think it's going to be really interesting. I can imagine having something just working locally on your laptop, right? Or having something running on your phone. So for instance, like as somebody that has kind of severe ADHD, big daily dose of Concerta ADHD, these small tasks are really tough for me to do. Like even something as simple as sending an invoice to a client or even paying bills. Like it's tough for me to keep up on that. And I can imagine having an agent in my inbox that every time something comes in, it's able to look at that bill and say, okay, this thing needs to get paid by this time. And it's connected to my billing system, QuickBooks, and it's able to, send the bill, or, it's able to pay the bill. I think that would be super helpful. So anything that can just help humans focus more on just the stuff that they're good at, the creative stuff, I think is going to be super powerful. So I went on a bit of a rambling there, so I'll pause and see if there's any follow-up questions.
What about multimodal AI? What's the future there, and how's it going to converge with RAG and agents?
Yeah, so multimodality, I think, is a natural extension for AI. Like, it's interesting to work with just images or just text, but if you combine them together, it opens up a lot more possibilities. So going back to that use case I was talking about when I was working with somebody to do a POC of a RAG system, being able to take an image or a figure from a document that you have, converting that into this vector representation that you can then ask questions over and then retrieve when you need, it's super powerful. So now we're just not retrieving just text, we're able to retrieve images and reason over that, or even just creating new things, right? Like kind of a bit of an anecdote, like this is kind of more in the generative AI space, but it goes into multimodality. There's a system called Suno.ai where it's text to music. And my sister uses this, and she's created like a proper album of baby songs for her, almost 2-year-old daughter. And it's just wild that she's able to unleash that type of creativity where she's able to, with natural language, get an idea out of her head and into the real world with relative ease. She doesn't have to pick up an instrument, mix stuff, and, go through all that process. She's able to go from what's in her head to now something in the real world as quickly as possible. And you just think about the value that will unlock for society if we're able to just do that, just reduce the barriers to making things a reality. I think that's ultimately the biggest promise of multimodal AI.
So watch out, Taylor Swift. AI is coming for your job too.
Yes, exactly.
The pace of innovation is going so fast with generative AI and AI in general. And you've mentioned some headwinds, but there's also data quality, data governance, AI literacy. In your opinion and from your experience, what are some of the biggest challenges implementing generative AI right now?
Yeah, data quality is like absolutely super important. I slept on that for like the longest time. I was one of the people that like, no, you don't need better data. You just need a better model. That's all you need. It's actually not the case, right? Like, garbage in really does equal garbage out, especially with deep learning and generative AI systems. I'm actually working on a course with Coursera, and it's the course is just, hands-on data-centric AI. And in this case, we're using the open source 51 library as kind of like the interface to do this kind of data quality. But, like if you think about trying to create an embeddings model, right? If you try to create, let's just say, a clip embeddings model, which is, doing contrastive learning over images paired with text, right? And if you have bad captions going along with the image, it's just going to be horrible output, right? If you look at the DALL-E 3 paper by OpenAI, they mentioned that one of the biggest things they did was improve the captions for each image that they had. And that just led to this amazing system, this amazing DALL-E 3 system that was leaps and bounds better than DALL-E 2. And, when you think about that, that's a data quality issue. That's having good data. So, even at CBPR, I was out there last week, and I sat in on a bunch of sessions and workshops, and the core theme was, one, we don't have enough data, especially for multimodal systems. And two, like the data that we do have, it's just not that good quality. It's noisy, right? If you're building like a computer vision system for like some type of object detection, and you build your system on, images that have noisy bounding boxes, that have incorrect labels, or maybe, the contrast is too low, or the brightness is too high, or the images are too blurry, you'll end up with a bad model. So, I mean, data quality, data curation, like you have to have that to have a good model. And if you look at all the papers we're talking about, or all the models that we recently talked about that were open weighted or open source, like the one thing they don't talk about is the data. They always exclude that. They always exclude not only what data they use, but typically the data curation process that they use to get that better data. That's the secret sauce, right? That's what makes models amazing. Like there's this is a cool sticker from Vox 51 here. Data eats models for lunch, and it's absolutely true, man.
When I was at JP Morgan, I was leading a project that was text-based generative AI, and one of our challenges was labeling. We had to hire a giant group of people to do labeling for us. What do you think companies should consider when they're trying to get that right data, but it does require labeling?
Yeah. Well, first, make sure even before you send data for labeling, just make sure that the quality of that data set is as clean as possible, right? Once that quality of that data set is clean as possible, then maybe you start with some zero-shot models and, kind of work at it from there. So you maybe use, we'll just talk about object detection or segmentation. Maybe use a zero-shot model to segment out stuff that you already know, or maybe, these models have open vocabulary, so you have it annotate stuff that is, based on its open vocabulary. And from there, just kind of find instances where it's low, confidence type of predictions and send those for further labeling. So there's like that pre-labeling step that I think is crucial. That will save a lot of effort. And luckily we have these models that are just now super powerful, where you can pass in natural language to, YOLO World or even segment anything type of model, and you're able to have bounding boxes, segmentation masks from that.
Which area of AI do you find most exciting, and why?
Definitely, vision language models I find really, really interesting. That's just because it's so cool to be able to reason over an image. And you just think about like the utility that would have to a low vision or blind person. Like we have these meta AI glasses that are out there, and if somebody with low vision can put those glasses on and interact with the world in a better way, I think that's ultimately super valuable. Like, my cousin here, she's got kind of a degenerative eye disease, and her vision is getting worse and worse with the time and age, and she's only 21, 22 years old. And I just think about, if we get models to a place that they can run on a pair of glasses, right? So model compression is also, getting models smaller is also important. But then just the way that she's able to interact with the world will be a lot more positive and a lot more better experience for her. So that's one reason I just love vision language models and multimodal models in that sense, just, how it can help people. And then also, like I mentioned, hinted at model compression techniques. So, it's hard to have like a multi-billion parameter model run on even our own laptop. How do you get these things? How do we get these models to maintain their capability while minimizing the footprint that they have in terms of, memory requirements and computational constraints, so that they can run on smaller and smaller devices?
Yeah, I just want to reemphasize your point about building models and designing for accessibility, because seriously, if companies will design their technologies with vision impairments, hearing impairments, neurological impairments, and other impairments in mind, they can improve the technology for all users. It's a win-win situation. It's a smart decision. Make your designs, make your models accessible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think in the future, people are going to look back at us like, oh my God, you're building models that were, how many gigabytes in size? That is ridiculous. And you used how much compute, and you did what to the environment trying to build those, right? Like, we really are in the infancy of all this stuff. And I think in the next, hopefully 5 to 7 years, we're able to train models that are a lot smaller, require far less compute. Maybe we'll have some architectural breakthroughs that enable them to be kind of more efficient during training and more efficient at inference, and small enough that, they can be everywhere. I think that's real value. And it's going to be a while, I think, till we get there. I feel like there's a over emphasis on people working on new architectures rather than kind of efficient and scalable AI. But, hope to see more and more of that.
Well, Harpreet, this was fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us. If people want to learn more, where can they find you?
Well, yeah, thank you so much for having me. Appreciate you guys inviting me on. Definitely connect with me, LinkedIn for sure, Twitter at Data Science Harp. On Medium, I tend to write a lot there, at Data Science Harp as well. Tune into the Harpreet podcast if you're interested. I got a YouTube that I'm slowly trying to build out with more and more kind of technical content. So that's also at Data Science Harp.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.